All right, welcome everyone to the speaker archive meeting. Let's have a moment of silence for the still suffering alcoholic, followed by the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. We ask that you take a moment to silence your cell phones out of respect for your fellows. We will now pass the basket in honor of the seventh tradition, which states every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. $15 today will go towards the rent of this meeting space. The rest will go to District 17. AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problems and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. I'm Justin, I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Justin.
Welcome to the Racine AA Archives speaker meeting. Consistent with Alcoholics Anonymous General Service Archives mission, our purpose is to document permanently the work of Alcoholics Anonymous, to make the history of the organization accessible to AA members and other researchers, and to provide a context for understanding AA's progression, principles, and traditions. We will meet here at the Grove Club on the last Sunday of every month. The first half of this meeting will be a question and answer period followed by a break. After said break, our speaker will resume with sharing their experience, strength, and hope pertaining to a chosen page from the Big Book. This meeting will be recorded and stored at the Racine Area Central Office. A digital copy will be sent to the Area 75 Archives. You may contact your District 17 Archives Chair, Sam in the corner, for a copy of this recording. Is there anyone with less than 30 days sobriety here? Not to single anyone out. Cool. Anyone with more than 15 years of sobriety here? The speakers selected for this meeting, or the speakers selected for this particular meeting, are old-timers. An old-timer is any member who has been continuously sober for a significant period of time. The definition of significant is open to interpretation and varies widely. For the purpose of this meeting, an old-timer is considered anyone with more than 20 years sobriety. The old-timers interview serve as representation of the significant impact that long-term sobriety can have on our AA community. So, everyone give it up for Kim S., our speaker tonight.
Okay, can I just say, I never really thought of myself as an old-timer.
Nobody
before.
does.
I mean, I know I'm old and everything, but I'm like, oh.
Kim, what's your sobriety date?
So, okay, I got sober in August of 1987, but I don't remember exactly what date. I think it's about the 27th, but somewhere mid to late August of 87. And I have proof because I have a big book that I got when I was in treatment. And there, you know how you people sign big books in treatment, like you sign yearbooks in high school? So I have a bunch of signatures, and they were August of 97, right? So there you go.
Awesome.
Close as I can get. Wow.
So back then, who was the president of the United States?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan.
Yep. And truthfully, I had to look it up because I really couldn't. I mean, I'm kind of really getting old, so.
Question 3, when and where was your first contact with AA?
Well, I knew about AA from many, many, many of my family members that were in and out and drunk all the time. But my first contact was while I was in treatment. I went to a 30-day inpatient treatment program in DePaul, in Milwaukee, DePaul Treatment Center in Milwaukee, and that was the first time that I went to a meeting. So, and I'll tell you a little bit of a funny little snippet. I was in treatment for alcoholism, and I had a pretty blazing eating disorder. And so when I went to my very first meeting, I was very nervous, and I didn't really know what to say, and I introduced myself as, "Hi, I'm Kim. I'm a bulimaholic." So I was all fucked up.
Can you describe what Alcoholics Anonymous was like back then compared to today?
Yeah, it was very different. Like I came into the program, I was in outpatient counseling, I came into the program, I came to meetings here. There were a lot of women's meetings, so I went to those. I looked for a sponsor, and it took me a long time to even find somebody that was willing to sponsor me. And I had several women sponsors in the beginning, and none of them worked the steps. So that was kind of an issue for me, right? Until I got desperate and took another course of action. But the other thing is that people not only didn't they really, and I think this was different from the men, but so I'm just going to tell you my experience and my story. So there wasn't, the meetings that I went to, they didn't talk really about the steps. I remember I was in the sick room one Saturday or Sunday morning, and I sat in this meeting, and there was a guy that was talking about how he had a bad day, and he punched his wife, and he kicked the dog, and but it was a really good day because he didn't drink. And that's what a lot of the meetings were like. You know, it was focused on problems. It wasn't focused on the solution like it is today, right? There was a lot of social activities, a lot of them, but you know, there were more social activities, I think, than program-related activities. So it was just very, very different, very different.
Yeah, it's crazy because I feel like men and women are chomping at the bit to sponsor nowadays.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
What were you like as a newcomer? How would you think that others would describe you as a newcomer?
Well, I didn't feel like I fit in, right? I mean, I didn't feel like I was getting any solutions for living, how to live differently from coming to meetings. So when I was here, you know, I wasn't outgoing. I didn't talk to people. I pretty much kept to myself. Just really timid and disconnected.
I can relate. Who was your first sponsor? How did you end up working with them?
So my first sponsor was a woman named Sue Cooper. And I met her in one of the women's meetings. And her husband at the time were coming to meetings. She had never worked the steps. And but one day I said to her, I think I need to work the steps. Because I knew something was missing, right? Something was really, really missing. I remember thinking to myself, if this is what Alcoholics has to offer, fuck it, I'd rather be dead. And I was more suicidal at 3.5 years sober than I was the day that I walked into that treatment program. So she's like, okay, that's fine. So I got a big book and a 12 by 12, and I read the first step. And then I had questions, and I went back to her, and I asked her some questions, and she was like, yeah, I can't really answer those questions because I've not done this. And I'm like, okay, well then I'll go on to step 2. So I went on to step 2. And it was kind of like lather, rinse, repeat, right? Same thing, I had questions. So then I decided, well, I think I just need to do a 4 step. Let's just jump right to 4. And so of course I have questions about the format. And finally she said to me, I just can't do this with you. I can't do this with you. So I started looking around, and at that point so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my second sponsor that really made the difference. I had a little brother that came into the program, and he was working with a group of guys, and they were actually working the steps, right? And so he tricked me on a Saturday night to come to a meeting in this big room here. And his sponsor and stuff were here, and guys from the group, whatever, from their group. And so I talked to them, and his sponsor did this whole chalk talk on the whiteboard, and, told me what Alcoholics Anonymous was all about, and that if I worked these steps, it would repair my relationship between me and myself, and me and my higher power, and me and other people. And I was like, okay, fuck, this might be what I'm looking for, right? So I decided, he said he would hook me up with someone. There was one female that was in that group at that time. And Mark, I don't know if you remember, but it was your first wife. And, oh, your second, okay, I'm sorry. I should have just said her name, because I'm not sure of the order. But anyway, so, yeah. So she sponsored me for a short amount of time. I got to about my 4th step, and I think it was maybe around her 9th step, and she left. And so then I was fucked. I really felt like I was fucked. And so Kurt Seidel was like my brother's sponsor, and he was sponsoring a lot of guys in that group, and they were sponsoring each other. And so he became my sponsor. And happened to be my sponsor for a while, until, this is part of my story too, I'm always kind of embarrassed to talk about it, but we did end up dating, and we had these really long talks about if we started to date, how was it going to affect the group, and what would that mean, and how would we handle ourselves, and a whole bunch of stuff, and set down a whole bunch of boundaries and parameters. And long story short, we did end up getting married, and we just celebrated our 31st wedding anniversary. So I guess it was meant to stick. But so that's how I ended up getting a sponsor that was strong with sponsorship and getting in with a lot of people, mostly guys at that time. But I don't even think I was done with I think I was like maybe, I don't know if I was completely done with my 5th step, or I was hitting my 9th step, when all of a sudden other women started coming into the group, and he was like, you're going to have to sponsor them because you're the only one, right? So it ramped up pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Sponsored by somebody who had not worked the steps, and you're still sober. Well,
right? Well,
worked out somehow.
A lot of white knuckling.
Sure. Who are some prominent alcoholics in early recovery?
So here's just a list of names that I made that I remember. Green Dick, Red, Marty, who we used to call him Smurf, Don Burry, Bill Hellison, Karen Norbert, and Ginger, and Mike Wheeler, and Dave Jacobs. So that was
very cool. Can you think of any AA catchphrases from back then that you don't hear anymore or as often?
Well, yeah. There's one that people used to talk about in context with the 3rd step, turn it over. Just turn it over. Turn it over to God, right? Like the 3rd step was like this magic wand kind of a thing, It didn't require, and once I actually learned about what the 3rd step really meant, because the 3rd step is really just asking you to make a decision to either live in the problem or live in the solution, right? That's all it's really asking you. So, but when it said turn your will over to the care and God as you understood him, right? That was that whole, because people weren't really working the steps, so they didn't really understand a lot of, what the book had to say about it and what the black parts of the steps were. So, yeah. And our group was pretty facetious about a lot of the things that we talked about. So we, you know, we would make fun of it, kind of, because, you know, we understood that you can't just turn something over. You don't just turn your rent over to your higher power and then hope that it gets paid, right? I mean, there's actions and there's work to do. So, so you don't hear that much. You don't hear that too much anymore.
Did you get involved in service early on? If so, what kind of service work did you do?
Yeah, I did. I mean, especially that 3.5 years before I got the sponsor that worked the steps. You know, I mean, I made coffee for meetings. I would open up for meetings. I would be the secretary, sometimes the treasurer. You know, I would get involved in, like, there was a conference that went on in Parkside, I think probably like, had to be like the 3rd year that I was sober, and I ended up speaking on a panel, and, you know, so I did that kind of stuff really just because I was desperate to do anything that would keep me kind of connected to the program, right? As I progressed later in my sobriety, you know, did other things like GSR, and, you know, we had the meeting list for RACO and, you know, other kinds of stuff like that. But
Cool.
giving people rides, you know.
Yeah. What what kind of events or social activities were there when you first got sober?
The only thing that I remember really were dances. This place had dances all the time, and it was such a fucking meat market. I'm telling you, if you wanted to hook up, just come to a fucking dance, right? There was always something going on. So, yeah. And that's really all that I kind of remember. And I was not one for dance. I would never dance sober. Are you fucking kidding me, right? So, I mean, I might come and sit here for a little while, but then, you know, I was out the door. And so, yeah, not anything I was really super comfortable with or thought was fun. So.
Sure. What about your first home group? What was it, and what made you decide to make that your home group?
So my very first real home group was the group that I got my sponsor at. And I don't remember. I mean, for a while, I think we might have called ourselves the inner group, or I don't know. I don't know that we ever really had a name. But, you know, there were certain meetings that we had at certain places, and the sponsorship methodology was always kind of put down that you need to go to like 3 meetings a week with your sponsor. And so, you know, it was that group. And the group in itself, I mean, has really morphed and changed over the years. It's different. I mean, we had a purpose in the past where, you know, this was one of the groups that heavily stressed working the steps and talking out of the big book, and that caused a lot of disturbances with other people in the program, right? Because it was different. And, you know, nobody wants some snot-nosed kid coming into a meeting and tell them that they're doing it all wrong, right? And I mean, but essentially that's what we were doing, because, you know, we were very, because Kurt came from a line of sponsorship that was very centered on the steps and growth. And in fact, I think it was Clancy, right? That you were in Clancy's line of sponsorship. And so some of you may not have ever heard of Clancy, but he was a big speaker and, you know, pretty strong. And so that was one of the things that, you know, made us cohesive as a group then. The people that were there was telling the truth about the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and explaining the message. And like we had big book studies where we went through the book and we tore it all down and picked it apart and understood what it meant, right? And then after we did the steps, you know, we did the traditions, we did the concepts, we did the history. You know, we just tried to get as educated as possible on the facts and on the message so that we could be concentrated on carrying that message forward. Because if you don't have a message, what do you have to offer? Right? And there was enough people that, I mean, it was like a fucking revolving door back then, you know? As many people were coming in the back door that were leaving through the front door. And so, you know, and I'm not going to say that we cornered the market on the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, because that wouldn't be true, but we were a group of people that were not ashamed to come up against whatever. Controversy if there was controversy, acceptance if there was acceptance. But it was just like, you know, people could go, enough people were already dying and not being able to find, you know, good sponsorship and good sobriety. So we just took the message very seriously.
Yeah, that's where it's at.
So, there you go.
Yeah. I think we're on question 12. What do you remember most about the first time you sponsored someone?
So, in fact, Patty and I were talking about this the other night, because Patty is one that I sponsored like 30 years ago, and then, you know, she had her journey, and now she asked me to be her sponsor again not too long ago. So it's great. But we were talking about, there was a woman named Marguerite who I sponsored, and she was my first one. And, you know, I was over-attached and over-emotional and so scared I was going to do something wrong. And, you know, even though we all know, you know, none of us have the power to keep somebody sober, and none of us have the power to make somebody drink, right? But she decided she was going to leave and go do her thing. And, you know, and I cried. Oh my God, I cried. Like, I was embarrassed, but I did it fucking anyways, right? At the meeting, in front of everybody. And because I was just so upset. And, you know, it is what it is. And I learned a lot of good lessons from that experience, right? It taught me how to be less emotionally attached to the people that I was sponsoring, right? And, you know, and at the time I was probably 4 years sober. I mean, it's not like I was sober that long, right? And I think once I ramped up, I had 6 pigeons. And over the years, I've never really had less than 6 pigeons. Sometimes I have more. You know, they fluctuate in and out. But, so that taught me a pretty good lesson. And then actually, Kevin, my friend Kevin, who always seems to scour the obituaries, found a death notice for her, and she did end up dying. And it was, you know, it was kind of sad for me to see that. But but that's, you know, that's how it goes, right? Some people make it, some people don't. Some people stay, some people don't, right? And we have no control and no power. You know, the people that I think, oh, this one's going to be really good and this person's going to make it, you know, I don't know fucking anything. Maybe they'll make it, maybe they won't, right? The people that I think won't surprise me. So, you know, it's just wonderful to be able to sit here and watch the miracles.
Sure. A pigeon is a sponsee?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was going to, yes, okay. Yes, we call them pigeons. And the term comes from, because a carrier pigeon, they carry the message, right?
Sure.
So that's where that phrase comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah. What? yeah.
Well, I can't wait to have Patty up here. You qualified to be up here, so. All right, moving on. Okay, so you were talking about, you know, what it was like the first time you sponsored someone. What about the first time you were sponsored?
Well, that's kind of like, you already heard me talk about that with Sue, and, you know, it wasn't so great. I mean, she was a nice friend, and we did social things together because she hated dances too. So, you know, but yeah, it wasn't a great experience as far as sponsorship goes.
Sure. What is prayer to you, and what are your prayer habits like? What does that look like on a day-to-day?
So prayer to me is talking to my higher power, talking to God. my prayer habits is, I do some formal prayer, right? Like third step prayer, seventh step prayer, prayer of St. Francis of Assisi. There are prayers, right? But mostly, I just have normal conversations with my higher power. And I do it multiple times every day, right? Because I really feel like, even in the beginning, there were things I needed to do to keep God in the foremost of my mind, right? And so, I used to carry shit in my pocket that, I'd reach into my pocket, I'd be at work, and I'd feel something, and I'd be like, oh yeah, higher power, right? And then I'd run to the bathroom at work, and if nobody was in there, I'd get on my knees real quick and say a prayer, and then jump up and, go back to work. So, it's informal, but it's every day, all the time, with almost everything, right? It's just a constant dialogue.
Yeah, conscious contact.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about meditation?
So I've learned that meditation is the practice of listening to God, right? And it could be through someone else's words, it could be through a thought, it could be through something that I read or something that I see or an experience with another human being. So, to practice to be open to all those things, I've done many different types of meditation. I've done some guided meditation where they talk you through certain things. I've done guided imagery meditation. I've done mindfulness meditation, which is trying to keep your mind right. Mindfulness, keep it in the present and not let it wander. And I've never been very good at that. There's a movement meditation that I read about that I tried, and it's a combination of like movement and breathing. And so that's kind of cool. I do a lot of breathing work because I've learned over the years how just simple breathing can take me out of a state of physical panic and calm myself down and calm my mind down so that, I don't always give that last piece of my mind to somebody, right? When I really can't afford to lose it. It's like, just calm down, just relax, take a breath, step back, right? So a lot of that, and I do a lot of energy work, with other people or just myself, and I like just anything and everything, right? Sometimes I just go to YouTube and put something in and search for it and see what comes up and just tries it, right?
Cool. Everybody ready for a break? We'll meet back here at 7:38.
Thank you all. I appreciate your warm reception. This is actually a lot of fun. I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm going to share with you, it starts on page 85 of the big book, and it's a little bit more than a page because it goes through part of 87, but it's like the end of step 10 and the beginning of step 11, and this is a practice that fucking saved my life many times. It's a go-to. It continues to be a go-to. So it says, halfway down 85, it is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. And, I have a little asterisk by this sentence, and I wrote this years ago. And the asterisk on the top of the page, I put discipline and growth, right? Because I don't think, we talk a lot about actions in the program, but one of the things I don't really hear people talk about is self-discipline and self-restraint. And I think those are very important actions, right, that come along with the principles of the steps. And even, not just the principles of the step, but the actual practical application of the steps. So every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will. Sorry, I'm like blind and I'm having a hard time seeing. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully followed directions, we have begun to sense the flow of His Spirit into us. To some extent, we have become God conscious. We have begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. Step 11 suggests prayer and meditation. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. It works if we have the proper attitude and work at it. It would be easy to be vague about this matter, yet we believe we can make some definite and valuable decisions. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Were we resentful, selfish, dishonest, or afraid? Do we owe an apology? Have we kept something to ourselves which should be discussed with another person at once? Were we kind and loving toward all? What could we have done better? Were we thinking of ourselves most of the time, or were we thinking of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life? So obviously, that's a synopsis of what step 10 is all about. And then I have another little asterisk in my book that says of what we could do for others, of what we could pack into the stream of life. And on this one in my notes, I have harmonious cooperation with our higher power, right? But we must be careful not to drift into worry, remorse, or morbid reflection, for that would diminish our useful forgiveness to others. After making our review, we ask God's forgiveness and inquire what corrective measures should be taken. And next to that, I just have listed the word facts, right? It's not an emotional thing about what I did wrong or what I didn't do, I didn't do the right thing, or I owe an amends, and God damn it, I don't want to fucking make amends to that person. Why couldn't I just keep my mouth shut, right? But it's just about the facts. It's not about drowning in self-pity or anything like that. Remember, we learned back in the steps about, being humble, and how if I'm a humble person, God is up here and I'm down here equal with everybody else. Right? Another definition for humility is that I'm teachable, right? Another definition is not that I think less of myself, but I think of myself less. I think more of other people. So then it says, on awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. Under these conditions, we can enjoy our mental faculties with assurance, for after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking is cleared of wrong motives. And I just know from my own experience, right? The more that I have those conscious thoughts about a higher power, the more my head is a lot clearer than the days that I don't, right? So on that higher plane. That's my every night and every morning. I kind of do those questions. And thinking about our day, we may face indecision. We may not be able to determine which course to take. Here we ask God for inspiration, an intuitive thought, or a decision. We relax and take it easy. Take a deep breath, step back, take a pause, right? We don't struggle. We are often surprised how the right answers come after we have tried this for a while. What used to be the hunch or the occasional inspiration gradually becomes a working part of the mind. Being still inexperienced and having just made conscious contact with God, it is not probable that we are going to be inspired at all times. We might pay for this presumption in all sorts of absurd actions and ideas. Nevertheless, we find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more on the plane of inspiration. We come to rely upon it. We usually conclude the period of meditation with a prayer that we be shown all through the day what our next step is to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom of self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. We may ask for ourselves, however, if others will be helped. We are careful never to pray for our own selfish ends. So it's that practice of reviewing at night, my day, and not, really searching into myself. Like, not just the actions that I did that day. I hear people talk about, I did a 10-step list and, I did this for somebody or I did that for somebody, and those are nice things, but the 10th step and then that start of the 11th step, that morning ritual, really over the years has done a lot for me to learn how to do self-examination correctly, right? Because when I would sit down at night, or, eventually it turned into a spot check inventory, and, now it's a spot check inventory. It can be an at-night inventory. Obviously, there's the, annual inventories, or however frequently you do them. But I have a lot, I'm 36 years sober, so I have a lot of information about myself, right? And if ever I want more, all I have to do is ask a couple of people and they'll give me all kinds of shit about me, right? Not necessarily the stuff that I want, but, the stuff that's true. So when I look at that and really, my sponsor used to say that in the 5th step, we get to see what makes us tick, right? We get to see those pieces inside of us. And he used to talk about searching every nook and cranny, every corner. And so that's how I was brought up to understand self-examination, right? To know about myself. And, just because I do a 4th and a 5th step, or I do a spot check inventory or an at-night inventory, right? All of those are the opportunity for me to dig into me, right? The more that I know about myself, the more that I know about other alcoholics. The more I know about myself, the more that I can give those things over to the care of God as I understand Him. The more that I do that, the more I can help other people that I sponsor, right? So it's really, really about digging into myself. It's kind of like doing 4 through 9, on that daily basis kind of a thing, which is exactly what step 10 is, right? But going through and looking, what are my defects that are coming up, right? How am I using those defects? What am I still getting out of them that I don't want to let go of? Why are they so important to me, right? Sometimes it's because I'm still getting some. I'm getting some kind of payday out of it. And I don't know what it is, but if I search about it and I talk to people about it, I'll typically find out. Sometimes it's because I don't want to do the work that's required, right? Because I'm still lazy, right? And here's the deal. And most of you already know this, but I don't care how long you're sober, whether it's 2 days, 5 months, 5 years, 15 years, 30 years, 36 years, it doesn't matter. You still have to do all the fucking actions. You can never escape that, right? So I have to do the same actions today that I did when I first got sober. Now I'll tell you that they mean different things to me, and things have changed along the way. A lot of fear has slipped away. I used to be deathly afraid to get up and speak in front of a group of people. In fact, I used to be deathly afraid to speak to somebody in a room, that I didn't know. Well, that's kind of obviously not a problem for me anymore, right? I've worked through that. And, and that was that kind of happened a little earlier on in my sobriety. And part of it happened because there was a work experience that I had to go through. And then, the other thing I learned from my sponsor is we are all walking, talking, breathing, alcoholism. There's nothing about me that's not affected by this disease. So I've always been pretty conscientious about carrying these actions, not just in family life, or not just in meetings, or not just with the people that I sponsor, but everywhere, right? I mean, some places they're easier to do than in other places. But, you know, that was a big thing. When I got kind of through that whole public speaking thing, that was a work thing, it just made me think, oh my God, I walked through those fears, and my sponsor would say, you walk through those fears, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and then there's an end. And if you walk through that fear all the way through, you will never have to experience that exact fear again, right? That gave me a lot of inspiration when I was like 8 years sober, 10 years sober, right? When I was afraid to speak my mind, when I was afraid to apply the principles of the steps, when I was afraid to stand up for what I believed in, right? All those different things. And, you know, and now I get afraid of something and I look at my watch and I go, oh, in 15 hours it'll be all over. Oh, in 12 hours it'll be all over, right? Because there's just, worrying about it isn't going to do anything. Being afraid of it isn't going to do anything. Having my sights set on harmonious cooperation with my higher power and walking through those things the best way that I know. And it wasn't always pretty, and it's not always pretty, right? But it doesn't have to be pretty. We just have to do it. We just have to continue to take the actions, right? So I guess, you know, that's kind of my go-to, is to really dig. And I'm not going to say, please don't think that I think that I'm perfect, or that, you know, I always do it in such a great way, because I don't. I'm a lazy loser, okay? I would much rather lay on my couch and play with my fucking iPad, play games on my iPad, than do anything else in the world, right? But I have enough appreciation and I have enough gratitude today, and I have enough evidence in my life of all the good things that matter that I never had before, right? I have good relationships with people. I'm honest, you know, for the most part, right? I connect with people in ways that I think it's important for me to have a positive influence on my little corner of the world, right? And I get to do that by taking these steps and these principles and taking them with me wherever I go, right? That's one of the ways that I build really cohesive, collaborative teams that work, right? That's one of the ways that I work with the people that I sponsor, right? That's one of the ways that I get along with my friends and my family. And, you know, again, it's not all perfect and it's not all rosy. But all I know is that what I've gained from this program, I don't want to give it up. And I don't want to give it up over something as stupid as me being selfish, or as stupid as me fighting something that is little, right? I mean, I like to be controlling. I like to have the last word. Just ask my husband, he'll tell you. You know, I want to be able to plan the shit. And I don't, a lot of times, it takes something to jar me to say, for me to ask the question, how do I look in other people's eyes? Because I only know what's inside here, right? And every time I do a fifth step, I get that mirror that my sponsor raises up and puts in front of me. And I can remember the very first fourth and fifth step that I did a fourth and fifth step when I was in treatment. And this is funny. The clergy guy that I did it with fell asleep in the middle of it. And then he excused himself and got up and left, and he never came back. So, you know, I was like, I didn't quite know what to do with that. But so my very first real fourth and fifth step was when I had gotten her first sponsor. And to have that mirror put up in front of me was like, holy fuck, that is so far from the truth of what I feel like inside, right? But I could see that that's how I look to other people. I could see that. and it was amazing. It was amazing. It was like, you know, do you ever have those times when you see something about yourself and then you get a like really big pit in the middle of your stomach because you're like, that's really icky. That's you're like, that's just like my mom used to be. Ugh. You know? Or that's just like all these people that I don't like act like that. But I find out most of the time that I don't like them or get along with them because I'm very similar to them, right? And so, you know, there was a lot of value in all of those things. So, I don't know. I guess to kind of wrap it up, it's 10, 11, and 12 are the growth steps, right? 1 through 3 are propositions and steps that we become convinced of. 4 through 9 are the action steps. And 10, 11, and 12 are the growth steps. And I can't continue to grow unless I do all of that and put it together in a package, right? Just coming to meetings is not enough to get sober and stay sober. Probably, I don't know if just working the steps is enough, but I know I wouldn't want that to be my only thing. Without meetings, without service, without sponsoring people. I mean, you put that whole package together, and it truly is the recipe for success, right? And I need to keep growing. And, you know, at some point, my sobriety has always been my responsibility, always. But the longer that I'm sober and the older that I am, I realize, yeah, it is truly my own fucking responsibility, right? Because in the middle of the night, when you can't get a hold of your sponsor or somebody else to talk to, right? And you're all fucked up and going through all these mental gyrations, the only thing left is your higher power, right? So how are you gonna work to depend on your higher power throughout the years of being sober and growing, right? I have to grow in my personal development, in my relationship with my higher power, in my relationship with other people. It's growth all the way around. And the only way that I know of how to do that is to practically apply the principles of these steps and, you know, put the whole package together, right? I mean, I can continue to work the steps, but if I don't have a sponsor or I don't come to meetings, how am I really doing that? Like, who's holding me accountable? Like, nobody. And I can sell myself a bill of goods in like 60 seconds flat, right? So it's like, it's all designed the way that it's designed for a purpose, right? So, and it works. That's the thing about it. It works. And it's not even like, when I look at the amount of actual work that I put into this program, it certainly doesn't even come close to being 100%. Not even close. There were times it probably wasn't even 50%, right? But it's kind of like, you know, trudging the happy road to destiny, right? It's, you just keep going. One of the things that every day my mantra is, what can I do today to be just a little bit better than I was yesterday, right? Sometimes I get there, sometimes I don't. But it's always a perspective. It's always a reference in my mind, right? This program is front and center to me. I mean, it means more to me when, you know, before we got married and we were talking about things, we both agreed that, you know, program comes first. Program comes before each other. And that's just the way that it's always been, and that's the way that I feel, and that's the way that he feels, and it's fine, right? There's no discontent there whatsoever for me. Now that doesn't mean that I don't sometimes get my feelings hurt or that I don't hurt his, but you know, it's just, this is it. This is what gives my life purpose. This is what gives my life fulfillment, right? This is what allows me to do all the things in my life that I never would have been able to do without practicing these principles, for sure. So if I don't have this, I really don't have anything. And all the good things that I have and all the things that I've worked so hard for will go away in a very short amount of time. It might take 36 years to build 36 years of sobriety, but I guarantee you a couple of days would probably be all that it takes. Could even be a couple of hours to destroy it all, right? So at this point, I'm lazy and I'm old, and I think it's just easier to keep doing it, right? It's just easier that way. So thank you all, and that's really all that I have. I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks.